for people who we didn't have much money, we didn't have a car, we didn't have, many TVs in the houses, didn't go on foreign holidays. I wanted to really work hard to get out of that cycle, to get out of that council vibe, that council cycle, if you want to call it that, and really do well. I know my past, know where I came from, and I don't ever change that. I had the best friends in the world. But there's a point that I wanted to grow up that my kids wouldn't feel the same things that I had, and I give them the best opportunities.
Hi, Steve. Thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed on the Blue Light Leaders podcast. It's incredibly generous of you. I know you're a very, very busy man, and I appreciate your time. So thank you for that.
No, welcome to be invited. And, it's nice to, meet you again, obviously after the other places and times that we've met.
Absolutely. No, it's great to see you again. And so it would be really helpful for people listening to this to understand, obviously, a bit about you. But if you could tell us what it is that you're currently doing, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, so I am the owner and CEO of a couple of groups of companies that offer specific discounts for eligible customers. So specifically Forces Cars Direct. So if you are within the military, serving a retired MOD, then I work directly with the manufacturers to offer exclusive discounts that you can't get anywhere else for those groups of customers, including their families. And Forces Cars Direct is one of my brands, and I have two others also, Motor Source Group, which is for the emergency services, prison, fire, police, NHS and teachers, same schemes, and one for professional sports stars, which is Black Gold vehicles.
Brilliant. No, thank you for that. And we met through our sponsorship of the Emergency Services Football League. So it was great to meet you as well. So
yeah, it's good. And we like to get involved in things like that, a lot of sponsorship of charity events and so on and so forth. And because I'm an avid footballer, and to be offered the opportunity to become a lead sponsor of an up-and-coming initiative, it was fantastic. And a great final last year where we met.
It really was.
Good game as well.
Yeah, so this year looks fantastic as well. I think we've got the women's final as well, which is brilliant. So really pleased about that. But I think it'd be great as well for people to understand your background, because obviously you're former military, and we'll talk about that in a bit more detail, and obviously went through that transition as well. But to go from where you were to where you are now is actually a brilliant story. And so it'd be great if we talk a little bit about maybe just touch on your upbringing, and then obviously your military service as well. It'd be really helpful.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up as a pad brat. So for people who don't know that, it means that your parents were in the military. So both my parents were in the military. One's from Leeds, one's from Newcastle, and we travelled around across the UK growing up. And I think in about maybe 74, 75, I ended up in Newcastle, and both parents were at the military, and just continued my growth. Although I wasn't, you being a former police officer, I did get into a little bit of trouble as a youngster. So like most people do. So I had a really good childhood. Difficult in the 70s, energy crises in those days as well. Didn't have much money, living on a council estate, and I was a bit of a scallywag really, skiving school, smashing windows, stealing sweets from from shops and things like that. But it did teach me some invaluable lessons, as a youngster, as to really what I wanted to do moving forward. Did I want to go down that, that little bit of a route, or do I, knuckle down and get things done? My brother, he continued down those particular routes, unfortunately. And for me, I had to make some changes from just being a little bit of a rogue to, doing something in life that I wanted to do. And eventually, when I was, growing up, got some decent education, and then ended up wanting to join the military at some point, which I did when I was 21.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, isn't it? How and I look back on my life and my childhood, and my dad was a cop, and all intents and purposes, I was a good kid.
Yeah.
But certainly got involved in some stuff looking back where it would have been quite easy to follow certain paths.
Yeah.
And it's funny, isn't it, when you look back and you think those decision points that you took, really do have a bit of an impact. And obviously you can always go back on stuff, can't you? You can always sort things out. But it is funny looking back, on potential career path, no, I say career, but life paths, if you like, that you could take.
It's difficult. I was always wanting to join the military, so I didn't really want to get into too much trouble. I considered smashing windows and things like that. I did get done for criminal damage smashing windows, but it was on a coal mine that was being knocked down. So I sort of thought, if I argued my case, I probably would have got away with it.
I think so.
But no, I did that. But my brother, he actually, I don't know if we spoke about this in the past, but my brother, he did steal a gun from someone and ended up shooting someone in the eye.
Wow.
And who lost an eye, who happened to be a mercenary as well at the time. So there was a lot of hullabaloo about his path as well and where he did. And I got a lot of hassle from school because I was married. I was the brother of, this idiot who ended up, robbing people's houses and, being a bit of a bully at school and so on and so forth. So it could have been very, very easy for that route to turn down that particular route.
Yeah.
And I think he was 16 at the time. I think I was 14 at the time. So I think that was the key for me, is like that. I don't want to get involved in this. I really want to knuckle down. I wanted to get out of my existence. For people who live in, we didn't have much money. We didn't have a car. We didn't have, many TVs in the houses. Didn't go on foreign holidays. Didn't have much to talk about. So for me, I wanted to really work hard to get out of that cycle. To get out of that council vibe, that council cycle, if you want to call it that, and really do well. I know my past, I know where I came from, and I don't ever change that. I had the best friends in the world. But there's a point that I wanted to grow up that my kids wouldn't feel the same things that I had, and I give them the best opportunities. So when I was 15, 16, I really had to knuckle down. Ended up, leaving home at 16, as people did in the 80s. People don't live at home till they're 25 like they do now, and just got off my way and started to be self-sufficient very, very quickly. But I'd always wanted to join the military myself, but I didn't want to do that as a 16-year-old. I wanted to be a civvie first, so that I could understand civilian life. I could understand what it means to be self-sufficient before I get into that uniform structure. So I was 21 when I eventually ended up joining the military.
What did you do in the military, Steve?
I was in Army Air Corps. So I was a ground crewman in the Army Air Corps, and today that would be Apache gunships, same as Prince Harry was in, that sort of regiment. And I wasn't ever going to be a pilot. I'm colorblind, I didn't have the academic qualities and reality to do that, but I wanted to travel the world. I went into the careers office. I asked them, where could I go in the world if I joined this regiment or that regiment? And they pulled out this leaflet, and it had a blue beret, and it was all these places in the world. I said, that's good for me. That sounds great. I'll join that. So I joined up in April 1990 and did my basic training, passed all of that, and ended up, my first posting was overseas in Germany in 4 Reg Army Air Corps, which came around the same time as the first Gulf War, essentially.
And you were involved in the first Gulf War, weren't you?
Yeah, so when I went to my unit in Germany, we were earmarked as an advance party. So that was about September, I think, of 1990. And I think August is when it sort of all kicked off in terms of preparations. And so by December, I flew out from Ramstein Air Base in Germany, 2 foot of snow, pretty cold, and then landed in Al Jubail, and it was like 30 degrees at 6 o'clock in the morning. It was a real eye-opener to go to your unit almost instantaneously. Within a couple of months, you're out in a theatre of operations, and proud to take the Queen's shilling at the time and do my service, and ultimately if you join up, you do expect that you're going to go to some form of conflict zone at some place. So I was pleased to go out and be a part of that operation at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. When you were looking to leave the military, did you have an idea on what it was that you wanted to do?
Not really, no. I mean, I'd got ripped off for buying a car. When I came back from the first Gulf War, I had a lot of money in my hand, and as you do, you piss it up against the wall and you spend it on girls and whatever, and cars and stuff. And so I ended up buying a car, and I got ripped off. And then I didn't like the way that they were treated. I didn't like the way the military were treated by those car dealers outside of camp who were just using them as an excuse to take money. So I never really had a consideration I wanted to be a car dealer or anything like that. That just happened at a place. But towards my end of my military career, so I did 5 years, just under 5 years in the military, all based overseas in Germany, albeit I'm going around the world, Canada and other places. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And the safest option for most people leaving the military, for me, was you go in some form of security. You go the bodyguard, you do something like that. And I wanted to do that in reality, and go to Bosnia, got something like that, which was about 2005, I think it was. Never materialized, so I ended up working for security at British Airways in Dusseldorf, security on one of the bases in Germany, and and just really bumming around, those types of jobs. So I didn't really have an idea of what I wanted, and I would have welcomed better advice. There wasn't great advice for the military leavers at that point. That's better today, but it wasn't great at that point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is, I've had a number of guests from the military that talk through their transition from the military, into the civvy world. And there is a lot of alignment. Like I say, it has improved, I think, in terms of what the military get now. And I think, law enforcement is still a little way behind really in potential options and reskilling. But so you left the military and obviously you had those other roles. So at what point did it kick in? You think, actually, there's a potential problem that I can solve here. So that entrepreneurial,
right,
that creativity, that sort of, you're spotting a gap in the market, if you like, and then filling that. How did you go about doing that?
Well, I mean, I think everyone as a kid would always want to be their own boss at one point, always want to do something at one point, but it's really hard to find something off the bat that's great. And in the interim of me working in these security jobs, I left all of those behind, got divorced, it didn't work, it cost me a lot of money, married to a German, and I had to have a complete change of dynamic lifestyle for me. So I was given an opportunity to work for a car showroom on one of the bases in JHQ in Germany. I didn't want to do that, absolutely, because I thought, well, they're all the same. They all talk about that, blah, 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 blah. But the guy who ran that was someone that I admired and I knew. And he said, look, you can do this the way you want to do it. If you've had some challenges and you didn't like certain things, then why don't you give something to soldiers on base that you should feel they deserve? And I liked that idea. It just came, it was good timing. Business is all about timing. It isn't, I'll sit down, I think of an idea and it all works. Everything is all about timing. So for me, that transition from being divorced and being, in debt quite a lot, to then go to something completely new and have a real, sense of teeth into it was great. So I went to work for this company, which was a large American company called OMZO, which was the largest company in the world at that point, supplying to US forces and small contingent of British forces. So I was trained by them, and I turned JHQ into the largest or the biggest network in the whole system out of all of the showrooms, simply because I had no bad habits. I treated people the way they should have been treated, and I had a real desire to make a success of myself, because I was essentially self-employed. I had to pay my own taxes. I had to, I didn't get any basic wage, so you really had to make it work. And at some point, I think I was living on 50, 60 Deutschmarks a month prior to that, because I had no money at all, getting divorced. So I really relished that and became the top salesman in the company for the next 3 years. And then I'd met someone new in Germany and wanted to come back to the UK. And I really I'd earned my spurs and I wanted to do my own thing. And, but didn't know what I wanted to do. And initially I was going to come to the UK, set up, work for a normal dealership and do that, and then figure out my place as to how I would do something on my own. But my old boss, not the guy I originally met, but the whole boss of the actual company itself, admired the fact that I turned something of JHQ into a massive plus, and said that he had an idea that he wanted to set up a UK operation, internet-based operation, not a UK operation, instead of having on-the-ground presence with cars in showrooms in Germany. and asked my opinion on it and said, what do I think? And I said, well, it would definitely work, but you would need to be supplied directly by the manufacturers in the UK and not have grey imports or parallel imports, which is what everyone was doing in the late 90s. And we needed to do things differently and dynamic wise. So he basically was sounding me out as a partnership, as opposed to whether, you know, I was just going to take an idea. So we basically got together, and he had business acumen. I had the knowledge at that point of what was needed for the clients itself. And we basically got together. In truth, he'd been doing this idea with showrooms in Germany for 30 years and didn't want to do much more work. So we do a partnership, and I run the entire business from day one. But that was a real challenge to try and set something up in the UK. You know, I'd just moved here. I didn't have anything other than a house and a girlfriend at the time. To then say, well, how do I get an office? How do I market? I didn't know any of these things. So I had to, it's easier being on base because everyone knows you're there. They just walk into your office. But to then set up something, to then figure out how to get that message out to people and get the best deals, that was a real challenge. And I relished and loved that process, essentially, of doing that from scratch.
That's incredible. So to actually be able to create that and then move it on and grow it, was that down to you know, your network, or was it certain core values and behaviors that you had, do you think, that helped to grow that?
Well, I didn't really have a network because the previous company that we'd worked for was a separate company, and that was winding down anyway as it was. So anyone who I sold a car to tax-free in Germany was probably bringing their car back to the UK, and I never knew them again anyway.
Right.
So we had ideas and areas of how to get that message to that client, or those clients in Germany. And that was just tax-free, by the way, when we first started. We only sold export cars. And so having the strengths of what I had within the military of being part of a team, growing a team. I wasn't I wasn't a sergeant or anything like that. So I hadn't managed anybody. It was very, very difficult for me to do that. So I was essentially a one-man band working on my own, you know, licking the stamps and doing the marketing and doing the invoicing and doing the presentations and doing the sales. You know, I literally had to do everything from scratch to learn those parts of that business to get that out. So I knew everything about every customer. I knew what it was and how it was to do that. The challenge was really getting the best deals from the manufacturers and learning that discussion, and that's what my business partner helped me do, because he was used to dealing at that high level. And then getting that message out. But being an ex-military person was very good for us, because we knew that I knew what a military guy felt like. I knew what he was as a person, how he worked, how they approached things, because I was that person. And so having the values of someone who was diligent, focused, ordered, those things were very prevalent in the military, but not so prevalent in civilian streets, which I noticed quite a lot when I got out, you know, of the military network to then live in the UK, and you finally find that a lot of civvies are, you know, don't have the same gusto and bluster as that. Not everyone's like that. Obviously, some people are very good, and we've got some good employees, but I found on average that they didn't understand the military network or a uniform structured network, for instance, like the police. Very, very different. And I think people who leave the military will all say that. But once you're in, you're a brother, you're part of that. Even if I never met someone in the military of a unit in my time, if I meet someone today, you're still classed as a brother. And I think you always get that once you've been in that theatre.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense, definitely. I'd also like to talk about some of the leadership skills that you picked up along the way. So you weren't, and how it drove the business, if you like, because obviously, like you said, you weren't in a managerial role or a supervisory role within the military, but you have, a substantial number of employees now. The business has grown extraordinarily well, and we'll talk about some of the challenges that you had along the way as well. But In terms of developing those leadership skills, Steve, how did you pick those up? And did you make any mistakes on the way?
I found that difficult, if I'm brutally honest, because if you're selling in a certain way or talking to a customer in a certain way and doing paperwork and it needs to get done. So I was working 7 days a week in some cases till 8 and 9 o'clock at night. When you're starting a business on your own, albeit I have advice to go to if I needed it, in the end, I'm there at night making my coffee at 10 o'clock at night, doing things that I need to do. And you don't worry about those things. You get that done as you're running a business. And my business partner said to me at one point, we're doing really well. We're getting the numbers where we expect to get them to. I think it's time that you get another employee. And I sort of looked at him and thought, what are you talking about? This is our business. This is mine and yours. We don't need anyone else. And he said one thing really important to me and said, look, you're going to need it at some point, a holiday, or you're going to be sick at some point, or, you're going to just be overwhelmed. And in truth, I was overwhelmed. I was wired, 3 hours after I got back home, and an hour before I got to work, I'm thinking of my hours worth of work. So I was constantly wired up 7 days a week for like 9-10 months. And or even for a year, I don't know how long it was, to be fair. And he said, you need someone just to take the burden off the administration side. And it did come to a point where we were getting more customers, and there were times where I just couldn't get back to them quick enough, because when you're talking to one customer, you can spend 2 hours on the phone to someone, or on 3 or 4 times a day. So so when we got more customers, it became important that I needed someone to do the administration side of things. So I reluctantly, I have to say, had to get a full-time administration person in the business. But it was the best thing that I did. And she's still with us today, nearly 20 years later, to be fair. And that rolled on to then bringing on a salesperson and so on. And I did have, I would say, over the first 4 years of the business, and we ended up getting 3 or 4 people or 5 people, I can't remember the exact number. And I have to say, I made a lot of errors in the way that I spoke to them, managed them, encouraged them, and so on. I was less encouraging, more critical, because I looked at it from my perspective and thought, I wouldn't have done that, I wouldn't have said that, I would have done it differently. And I didn't have the ability to think of them more as my team, and I thought of them as my, they were below me. It was that feeling of, well, I'm the boss, you're someone below me, do it my way and not your way. That was a real mistake. But I learned very quickly, not because people left or did different things, I had to find that out for myself. But over time, I realized that really I should be treating them the way that I was treated, the way my business partner treated me, or the way my wife treated me, or whatever. So it did take me a long time to relinquish control, not micromanage, and understand that the team is a team together as opposed to an individual. So I have to say, I did make mistakes. I probably lost good staff. Probably didn't realize it at the time, but I probably lost good staff. But it made me and the team and the company stronger moving forward, because I was more empathetic, more encouraging as a team, growing on. People who talk to me, meet me today, would say, really, you weren't like that, were you? But I was. Yeah, I probably was. But I think you have to learn, and I would talk about it as being going from a gobby sprog to someone who did well. And so I would happily take that on my back and say that was a challenge that I had to overcome. I had to overcome it, not someone else. I had to do it myself. I had to realize it myself and do that. And I think it does happen. You've got that one-man band syndrome thing where people set up businesses, and I've seen it since, and I've actually given advice on that to other businesses, where people get to that situation and there's a mistrust of bringing someone on board who knows more about that. In the old day, I knew everything about everything. Today, I couldn't tell you half the stuff that goes on in marketing or half the stuff that goes on in administration and so on. And I actually rely on them to get those things done. And if things don't go well, fine. Managers make their decisions, good and bad. They live by those ones, and they will learn by that. So they were in the positions where I was, if you think of those chains going down. So it was a great eye opener for me, to be fair.
Yeah, no, and I really appreciate you being so open and candid about that, because I think that's a really valuable lesson for people who are, leaving either military or policing and moving into, into civvy street in some role, private, public sector, and then taking on staff. And it is different. It is different. And, you do have to be a lot more subtle and a lot more aware of other people's strengths and how they can complement, the work that you're doing. That really does make a massive difference. It really does. Yeah.
You have to listen more than you talk.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a salesman. Obviously, I'm going to talk a lot more and than most people. And sorry, this camera keeps there you go. And so if you listen more, evaluate everything that is said, because you can have opinions, and if you're not doing something on a day-to-day basis like the admin or the marketing, your opinions are only based on what you see, so you don't know the things that are behind the scenes. So if you charge in and step on someone because you want to flex your muscles, like micromanagers doing, like I did originally when I was on that, if they don't have a voice of a person, then they then can't tell you of other things that I wasn't aware of. So if I have a conversation today with a manager or member of the team, I try to listen to everything it is. I might make some notes and say the things that I've spotted, but I can tell you today that if I have that manager's discussion or look at some form of statistics, half the questions that I'm asking for, they've already got the answers for anyway. So, and they may have done things and action things behind the scenes or done stuff down the line that may not have been a result, but it's no point in charging in like a bull in a china shop saying, why haven't you done this? Why haven't you done that? Well, in actual fact, if you'd have listened, you would have found out that they had done that. They're waiting for someone else down the chain or something. So if you can encourage and empower those team members who, I've got 4 managers in my team. One of them was a dealer principal before the hand anyway, but I've got a marketing manager and a dealer account manager and an administration manager. But when they came, they were just normal people like I were. So now they manage teams of 5 and 6s and 3s and 4s and whatever. And if you don't encourage them and empower them, allow them to make mistakes, because all businesses make mistakes, all people make mistakes, and you just have to take it on the chin if it's not a mistake that you've done and it's a mistake that someone else has done. Because if you allow them the ability to make a mistake without fear, then they're going to make decisions, and some will be right and some will be wrong. If you have a manager that makes no decisions, or anybody that in a business that makes no decisions, then you're never going to get anywhere. And you have to always step forward. Sometimes you'll take a different tact and you'll come back, but at least you'll know what does work and doesn't work. And so I think you have to allow that manager or individual staff. I don't have a disconnection between managers and staff. I tell, a team of 20 people, so I know them all very well anyway. So you have to have the ability to let everyone have a voice, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, something I was really struck by when I popped to see you and Zoe was it was just such a lovely atmosphere in there. And it was, the fact that people had been there for such a long time as well. And I think that really, really spoke volumes of your leadership and the ethos and values of the company as well. So I was really impressed, Steve. I'm not just saying that. It was lovely meeting everyone, and it was such a warm, friendly place. It was great.
It's good of you to say that, because that transcends not just to your customer, because if you have, the tone from the top is is disastrous, then it will cascade down to eventually down to your core customers. So if you have good tone at the top and you've got good managers and they've got a good support mechanism behind that whole system, then that not only works for your customers in terms of your actual core clients, but also your customers who are your partner organizations as well, who you can have that good ethos with them, and they'll feel that. They'll feel it within the atmosphere, or the you know, if you do something bad, everyone will tell everyone about it, and you'll get around pretty quick. So I've never wanted anyone to feel bad about us. And when I did hear things, because I was in that old, you know, my way is the highway type of idea, I couldn't be further from that now. You know, I hate those phrases. I hate, it's my train set, so I'll do it my way. I hate those. So you know, you make decisions, you get everyone involved, everyone has a voice. Of course, you have to have a decision in the end. And there's lots of cases where I will overrule someone because you've got to make a decision and I prefer a different route. But I have a very simple plan. If we do something that's involving everyone, 4 or 5 managers at the time, and 3 want one way and I want another way, I honestly will not go. I will always go by the percentages, always go by what the team think. You know, if it's 2 in one, 2 in the other, then my decision is the casting vote, of course. But I would always ask everyone's advice first, even down to, you know, we're doing a new social media campaign, or we're doing a new advertising campaign, and the colors or the formats and so on. It is down to the marketing department to get that, but we still like to involve, because we're all normal people, the admin. What do you think of this? And what do you think of this? And what do you think of that? And if they go against what I think, but the numbers on that side, then I will always go with that. So I don't always get my way, is what I'm trying to say. As a boss, it's not always about that. It's about what the team think as well.
And it's that sort of emotional intelligence led and situational led leadership as well, really, really important. And it's I'd like to say, I really appreciate you being so candid about you know, about some of the challenges you had. That's really helpful. When you're employing staff, Steve, are there certain core values and behaviours that you expect from those members of staff? So is there something that you have around the organization, around the business, around those core values and behaviors? Yeah,
I suppose honesty, integrity are the 2 most important things for me in a person. You know, sometimes when you interview people, you can get people just, you know, bullshit just to get through the interview. So I'd rather people were honest to me up front if they lack skills, or you know, they've had just some bad luck over time, and you know, they just want a chance. I was a person who just wanted a chance. So I always listen to people who say that. If people are more honest and open, I admire that, because it's hard for people to put in front of them. I've had people who have had troubles with the law in the past, or they've had, you know, issues with family or whatever it may be, you know, or they jumped around from job to job because they just couldn't settle and they just didn't really get that. I've had bad jobs where I didn't like people and I've jumped from job to job, but still someone gave me an opportunity. And I think if you have a really good interview, and I don't do the interviews anymore, actually the team does that as well. So they have, again, allow them to learn their experience from that. But honesty and integrity are the 2 most important things for us. We're dealing with a lot of data. We're dealing with a lot of people who are military or, you know, emergency services led, and they expect people who are, you know, they're structured as an organization. So they expect us to be structured correctly, and get back to them when we say we're going to get back to them, be honest to them. And if we can't do something, we've got to be honest back to them. So honesty and integrity are the 2 most important factors. But I do feel as a business that employing people is one of the hardest challenges. It is the hardest challenge other than finding customers. It's the absolute hardest challenge. And in the past 20 years, I don't think there's ever been a period of time, pre-Brexit or post-Brexit, where that's always been a challenge. I think finding the right candidates and clients, we pay well, we look after people well, the people look at how long people have been here, they'll get a sense that the companies have got good values and so on. We're growing as a company. We've got the best reputation in this entire market, not just with the manufacturers, but with our clients' bases as well. But it's not enough. You've got to get the right people in your organization to do that. So I find if you try to get people in and spend money to get people in and train them up, and they don't last 3 or 4 months, then that's one of also the biggest costs, unfortunately, of the business, to then re-employ, retrain, and so on. So getting the right people, spending time getting that initially is the most important factor.
Yeah, sure.
Never employ friends or family. That's another tool. Never, ever do that. It may work for some people, but you have to have a disconnect between family life, work life, friend life, home life. You have to have that. I've done that in the past. I've employed people because they needed a job, and they did well for us, to be fair. But it doesn't work, and you have to have a point where you have to have that difficult conversation if something doesn't go right. And in my experience, friends don't take it well. Normal employees do take it well. So it's very hard to be harsh to a friend and then 5 minutes later have a beer with them at home. So that's very, very difficult. So that's a mistake that I made, and it's probably not something you want to do if you're going to set up a business.
Yeah, sure. Oh, that's great. Thank you for that. Could we just quickly talk about where the business started off in terms of potentially location as well, and what you had that initial setup, and then where you are now? So that progress from where you were to where you are now.
Yeah, so when I came from Germany, Lincolnshire just happened to be cheap houses in 2000. So my wife's mother, or my wife's family, come from Glasgow. My mum was living in Staines. Lincolnshire was halfway. That's how I picked my business. I may be different because I'm coming from another country, from that side of things. So location, being an internet sales business, didn't really make a difference where we were based. But for us, midway through the country worked at that particular time for us, from that side of things. You know, we started off just with selling cars to the military, tax-free. Then we expanded that to military within the UK. Then we expanded that to the retired military. And then we had the financial recession, which we can talk about challenges later if you want. And then in 2010, 11, 12, we looked at people who were leaving the military, joining the police or joining the emergency services of some sort. They would still be coming to us for cars. But then say my mate in my, police headquarters wants a car as well. Can you help him? He's not military. And I thought, oh, okay, well, could we look at that? I mean, these are public sector workers, people who don't get paid as much, get more hassle essentially from people in the public, don't get paid as much as the private sectors maybe do. And at that point, we're always looking as businesses to find new markets of such, keeping it within the confines of the manufacturer's regulations. And to me, it made absolute sense to give back to the emergency services, the NHS, the police, the prison service, the teachers, and so on. That made absolute sense for us. For those periods at the time that there were police officers killed, I think there were a couple of police officers brought to an ambush and shot and killed. There was others stabbed on a daily basis. There was a teacher stabbed in Leeds. There was a fireman thrown, fire bombs up in the riots in London. And I thought, I could never be a police officer or a nurse or a teacher or a fireman. But I'd join the military, and if something happened tomorrow, I'd join straight up. So it takes a certain type of character in person to be that person. So I felt that they deserved as much as putting their lives on the line on an everyday basis and not getting much recognition from that we should have a scheme for that market. So we created the Motor Source Group back in 2012 as a test, and launched it fully in 2013.
And it's gone from strength to strength, isn't it? I mean, it's phenomenal. It really has. But some of the challenges that you went through, obviously, we touched on the recession, and I know it's not been plain sailing for you, is it?
No. So we've had, everyday business decisions. You have, costs involved in that, staffing issues, buildings, whatever it may be. You're always having these HR and whatever. So these are ongoing business challenges that you have. But when you have macro challenges that are outside of your control, like a financial recession or drawdown of troops from Germany or COVID, these are really difficult times, and lots of businesses have fallen and gone under because they haven't had the strength or foresight to cover or cater for those markets. So the financial recession was very, very difficult and easy in a way for us, because financial recession cost a lot of jobs and it cost a lot of heartache for people. But our audience at that time was military. Well, military people don't get made redundant. So essentially we were actually probably okay at that point. Where it did affect us is that nobody wanted to buy a used car. So anyone who had a used car that may have been valued at this level was now worth this level. So then they wanted to cancel their car because they weren't able to swap their car. So that caused a lot of issues for probably about 8 or 9 months. And you could see that it was coming back very quickly, probably after 6 or 7 months. So there was an initial, my God, what's going on? Then everybody just stopped. And then after a while, things started to pick up. But it did take about 9 months for that to come back. So that was a challenge that we had to overcome. We had actually expanded at that point, doubled our business space and so on and so forth. To then have that to happen, we unfortunately had to make some tough decisions and just say, okay, well, we have to scale back a little bit. You know, profitability was being hit and so on. You can't be blind in a business by saying it'll come back, it'll be okay, it'll be that. You have to make tough decisions, good and bad, you know, to make the survival of the business. And if you have to release 2 or 3 people to save 10 other people, then fortunately that's what you want to do. You'll have to do that. So we had to make tough decisions at the time, but it came back and it was good. And then we launched the UK side of things, and it's grown, you know, the largest supplier to those sectors, which we're very proud of, over those past 7, 9, 10, 12 years nearly. And then we had obviously COVID, which happened in 2020, I believe, the beginning of that. And that was, as it was, an unprecedented set of circumstances. So you had no one open. It wasn't as if someone was open and someone was still operating. Dealerships weren't open. You couldn't get cars out. You couldn't get cars ordered. You couldn't speak to anyone in the manufacturer. No one worked from home. All of these things were real problematic. And I have to say, a big thanks to the government and Rishi Sunak for coming up with the schemes that allowed the wages to be paid for employees, because that was important. We still had open orders for customers. We still had to get on the phone and actually say, look, we can't give you any information, but of course we are here and we are answering emails if necessary for that. So you can't just forget about people. You still had to talk to people and discuss with people what will happen when it opens up. When it did open up, there was a quick, buzz of people coming in and buying vehicles and so on and so forth. Now, I wrote an article at that point that wasn't picked up, and it was called The COVID Car Crash. And it basically talked about what was going to happen over the next 6 to 10 months of car supply and everything else like that. No one talked about it in June that year. But I saw that that was a problem because the factories were closing down. It was obvious we were going to have that supply issue at some point. But everyone walked through this, field full of roses, thinking it was all okay. In normal circumstances, you have pipeline of stock, factory orders where you're starting from scratch, pipeline and stuff that's already in the UK unsold. What happened is all the unsold units got picked up very quickly. Pipeline got shrunk almost to nothing, and factories got extended from 6 months to 12 months or longer. So it was very quick from our perspective that order times would get extended. We would have an initial buzz, but we need to be prepared for longer lead times. And this was back in June 2020. Go forward another year, and everyone started talking about there's no supply of cars, we can't get hold of them. That then had an effect on used cars because people who wanted new couldn't get them, so they went out and bought used cars. Then there was more customers and less cars. That raised used car prices and continued to raise. Again, which I said would happen at some point. So those were real challenges of trying to solve those problems. In between lockdown, by the time second lockdown happened, we were all working from home. and so on and so on and so forth. So we managed to cater for that a little bit better than what we had in the first one. But we're not out of the woods yet. You know, we're now 2022 October, and there are still supply issues compounding the standard factories at not 100%. Even if they had the staffing levels to create the 100%, they don't have the raw materials to filter those manufacturers' needs. And semiconductor chips, which we've all heard from at that point, it's not something I didn't even know existed, to be fair. So that was a balance of something that came out last year, that semiconductors would be a shortage. But we knew that copper would be a shortage, and cobalt would be a shortage, and rubber would be a shortage for the other supply chains that we already knew that were going to struggle. So even if the factory is at 100% today and the logistics is at 100% today, you just can't get the materials to the manufacturer to produce that 100%. So I'd say the manufacturing is probably maybe 60, 70%. In some cases, probably less at others. So our business has been, you know, in a still transitional phase right now from coming out of COVID to get back to where it should be. Where I think it'll probably happen is that used cars will only come down once supply of new cars comes up. It won't come down earlier. It will get readjusted. So they are coming down, used car prices, but they're still higher than pre-pandemic levels. So they're not going to get down to those lower levels until that happens. So we feel that as a business, we've got to strategize for that as much as we can without, you know, we can't control it. New car supply probably won't get back to normal until probably middle of next year at its earliest. And what I mean by at its earliest is that you have pipeline stock that you can take from, stock on the ground that you can take from, and then standard factory order is 12 weeks. It's very, very hard. Manufacturers are only building cars that they ordered for last year. They're not, most of them aren't building cars that you order today. So once that supply comes better, then used car values, they will drop, but also new car values will drop as well. You won't have dealers saying, you know, well, that's what it is, pay the money, you know. And then that supply chain, you've obviously got the energy prices because of Ukraine, you've got inflation, which isn't just, you know, subject to the UK, it's happening all around the world. So it's not something I don't think is anything to do with Brexit. I don't think it's got anything to do with Ukraine. The inflation costs were going up beforehand, supply was going up beforehand. People just didn't see that. But the reality is it was. Ukraine hasn't helped naturally. So I'm hopeful for, firstly, get that inflation under control, get the consumer confidence better, and then things can happen, not just for us, but for coffee shops and for other businesses that are out there as well. So challenges wise, you know, you've got as a business to be able to be wary of things that you can't control, but you've got to get on it very quickly. You can't bury your head in the sand and think it's going to get better. You've got to make strategic decisions that work on that. And thank God we've got a good team around us to do that.
Yeah, sounds like it, and incredibly challenging for so many businesses at the moment. It really is. And so, you know, with those challenges, why should people come to you? So, you know, we've got Motorsource Group and emergency services teachers, NHS, all those sort of people. What are the benefits of coming to you, Steve, as opposed to going to the dealer down the road?
Well, I think I mean, anyone can sell a car. I mean, you know, I was selling cars 20 years ago when we first started up the business, but we weren't the first to ever sell vehicles. So we're not trying to say that we're, you know, selling a different model vehicle. It's exactly the same model car. You get the same warranties from us from that perspective. But what we do is that we have enhanced discounts that we've negotiated only for our eligible customers. We're not allowed to sell them to people who aren't part of that group. So essentially, we're offering deals for them, a larger saving, and the fact that we understand you as an individual, that we can give you honest and impartial advice. So if you walk into a dealer, for instance, he might tell you one thing. You then go to the next dealer and he'll tell you another thing, because they're only telling their own individual aims. So you can walk into 4 dealers, you'll get told 4 different things. So who do you believe? You'll get 4 different part exchange prices, you'll get 4 different new car prices. Who do you believe? It's very difficult. So for us, we're independent in terms of how we operate in terms of finance. So we give you the best rate that's available in the marketplace. We give you the independent price for your part exchange, and we offer the lowest possible price for the new vehicle. We don't insist tech finance with us, and we don't insist you take part exchanges with us. You're still a customer and you're free to do whatever you want. We're just putting our name in front of you so that you can speak to us with the confidence, knowing that at least you're being told the truth. We come across lots of customers who say they get a better price elsewhere, or they can get a car quicker. And we say, okay, no problem. If that's the case, go ahead, and we hope that you get it. Normally 3 or 4 weeks later, they come back and say they can't do that deal. Or I've ordered the car and now they can't get that car. It's now 6 months and you told me it was originally 6 months. So lots of people will say what the customer wants to hear just to get the sale. Oh yes, we'll get you your part exchange value, or you can have your car in 4 weeks. It's obvious. You can go behind the scenes and see straight away that the cars aren't worth it, or that the delivery times are actually quite extended. So we make sure that we are as honest to our customers as possible based on information that we're given, in order to give the customer the best opportunity to make a decision. And I think that that's the most important factor for us, is that honesty and that integrity from the start, because there's no time in it for us to just get a sale for someone to cancel later because we give them the wrong information. We're a business. Unless a code delivers, we don't earn anything. So we're not earning for our time. So we have to make sure that our time is efficient and the customer gets the correct information. If you're a police officer and you're a military officer, a nurse, and whatever, chances are you're in a high-powered job. You're very, very time conscious. You don't have a lot of time. You want to be told the truth as quickly as possible. So we recognize that, so we have to do that quickly. There's no point in fluffing it around. So I guess that hopefully answers your question. Yeah,
it does. Yeah, and I think it's reflected as well in the Trustpilot reviews and such like as well, isn't it? Which is absolutely exceptional. And I was really, really impressed.
Yeah, we get it wrong. Don't forget. I mean,
of course.
If you're absolutely honest, of course things go wrong, and but I always have the ability that if someone does go wrong, that we make sure that we put it right as best we can, because there could be things out of our control from that side. So we don't say thanks for your order, tough luck. We don't do that either. We still communicate with our customers post delivery to ensure that, making sure everything goes right. And if there's an issue or a question or something, if it's a mechanical, technical question that we can't answer, then obviously you can go to any dealer in the country and they can solve that mechanical issue, whatever that is. But initially, they always speak to us because we're that conduit that we have that speaks to that. The administration team or the marketing team or the sales team or the administration team handle that really, really well. And we do get not so good reviews, but on the main we get good reviews because we treat our customers well. Treat them how you should want to be expected. You go to a restaurant to get a warm meal that tastes nice, that's on time. You don't expect it cold and and taste horrible and so on. So you want to have a good experience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You work closely with the Federation as well, don't you? You've certainly got a relationship with the Police Federation, haven't you?
Yeah, we have a lot of organisations that are within our spaces that specifically work with us as a motoring scheme, and for I guess all the reasons that we spoke about over the past 40 minutes. Their clients or their members want impartial and good advice from a company that can supply them whatever they're looking for. So we've been working with them for a number of years, individually and as organizations, whether it's the Royal Society of Medicine or the College of General Practitioners, federations. A lot of those organizations that we've brought on board, we've supported either in charity events or in sponsorship or in just their clients and members themselves. So I think it's important to give back where we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And very kindly offered to sponsor the Blue Dot Leavers podcast as well, which I'm incredibly grateful for. And obviously having you in the group as well, it'd be fantastic. So.
You're welcome. What you're offering to also people who've been from that world, you've done that, you were a police officer, and now you're going into other areas. that advice that you're going to give for that, I think is important. So, for us to support you in that venture is important for us as well.
Brilliant. It's very much appreciated, Steve. Thank you for that. Incredibly, we've covered so much stuff, and it's touched on everything from transition to leadership to the challenges of business ownership and how to go about setting that up. And incredibly insightful. So I really appreciate your time, Steve. It's very, very good of you.
You're welcome. And you heard about me smashing windows as well. So feeling sweets. I still like sweets today, but I do pay for them.
Good, because that's brilliant. Okay, well, thanks so much for your time. Great to talk to you, and look forward to catching up with you again soon.
No, thank you for inviting me on board, and it was great to speak to you today.
Brilliant. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Andy.
Well, a huge thanks to Steve for his time, and a really insightful, very honest interview there. And so we covered all sorts of topics, didn't we? From transition to leadership to business ownership, and what he looks for as employees, and much, much more. So really hope you found that helpful. If you like what you heard, then please leave a review. You can go to Apple Podcasts and click on 5 stars and leave a review there. You can also do so on Spotify. You can also join the private Facebook group if you haven't done already, which is facebook.com/groups/Blue Light Leavers. As I said before, the Academy will be opening soon, and that is for those that maybe need a little bit more help and support right now. And that includes live interviews with subject matter experts covering CVs, LinkedIn, and all sorts. Q&A sessions with police leavers who've moved on to new careers, and Q&A sessions with me and specific topics around how to identify those skills and experiences, that awful transferable skills thing, and lots more. So if you want to find out more about that, then you can contact me direct at andy@bluelightleavers.com. Thanks as always for listening. Really do appreciate it massively. It makes a huge difference, and it means the world to me. So thank you for that, and look forward to speaking to you again soon. Take care. Bye for now.